It's interesting how silence can sometimes be louder than words. When two people have shared 50 or more years together, you might expect the bond to be unshakable, built on decades of shared meals, family gatherings, and countless little routines. And yet, what often happens is something quieter, almost invisible, a gradual drifting apart. Not in anger, not in betrayal, but in the way two rivers can start from the same source and slowly carve different paths. It can be unsettling when you notice this distance for the first time. You might catch yourself sitting across the dinner table and realizing there's little to talk about beyond the weather or the day's chores. And perhaps you feel a pang of guilt for even noticing it, because wasn't this supposed to be the reward of growing old together? The comfort of familiarity? But here's something worth remembering. Love changes shape over time. The fiery passion of your 20s softens into the companionship of your 40s. And by the time you're in your 70s or 80s, love may feel more like a quiet presence than a burning flame. That's not a failure. That's simply the way life unfolds. At the same time, though, when silence turns into loneliness, it can weigh heavily on the heart. What makes this stage of life tricky is that your needs as a person are still very real. You still crave to be seen, heard, and understood, even if you no longer expect grand declarations of love. And if that recognition is missing, it can feel as though the marriage itself has gone missing too. Here's a gentle thought. Before labeling the quiet as emptiness, ask yourself, what remains here? Is there still kindness in the way your partner brings you a cup of tea? Is there still respect when you talk about decisions that matter to you? Sometimes the signs of love don't shout, they whisper. And if you can learn to listen for those whispers, you might discover that the bond is not as broken as it first appears. It's also helpful to reflect on your own role in this distance, not in the spirit of blame, but of curiosity. Are there ways you've stopped sharing yourself, perhaps without noticing? Have you retreated into habits that keep you safe, but also keep you apart? None of us stays the same across decades, and sometimes the person you've become needs different kinds of connection than the person you were years ago. That realization alone can be powerful, because it means you still have a choice. You can choose to reach out, even in small ways. Maybe it's as simple as asking, "What's on your mind today?" and really listening to the answer. Maybe it's finding a moment to recall a shared memory, not for nostalgia's sake, but as a reminder of the life you built together. These are not grand gestures, but they are seeds. And like any seed, they need time and patience to grow. Of course, the question remains, what if the quiet no longer feels like peace, but like emptiness? That's a question only you can answer, gently and honestly. It doesn't demand a rushed decision, only an openness to noticing what your heart is telling you. Wherever you find yourself, remember you are not alone in this experience. Many couples in their 70s and 80s are quietly asking themselves the same questions, trying to make sense of a bond that is both deeply familiar and strangely distant. And that in itself is a form of companionship. You are part of a shared human story. I'd love to know, where are you reading this from? Leave your location in the comments. Sometimes simply sharing where we are can remind us that even across distances, we are connected. Sometimes the deepest ache in a long marriage isn't about conflict at all, but about a strange sense of living side by side without truly being together. You may share a home, meals, even a bed, and yet feel as though your lives have slipped onto separate tracks. This isn't something that happens overnight. It builds gradually, like two trains that once ran close together but slowly drift onto different rails. Margaret, a gentle woman of 74, once told me, "I looked around one day and realized that my husband and I were living in the same house, but not the same life. He had his garden, I had my books. We weren't angry, we just weren't connected anymore." Her words were filled not with bitterness, but with quiet sorrow, as though she were grieving something invisible. And perhaps you felt something similar. Not hostility, not resentment, but a silence that feels like absence. What can be confusing is that this separation doesn't always come from neglect or lack of love.
Sometimes it's simply the natural evolution of two people who have grown in different directions. Your interests may no longer overlap, your energy levels may not align, or your rhythms of the day might have changed. Where once you shared projects and plans, now you might find yourselves retreating into solitary activities that bring comfort but not connection. The first step, if you recognize this in your own life, is to acknowledge it without judgment. You don't need to label it as failure or loss. It's simply reality as it stands. From there, a gentle question arises. Do you want to bridge this gap, or do you want to accept it as it is? Neither answer is wrong, but each carries its own path. If you feel drawn to bridging the gap, start small. Choose one shared activity, not something heavy with expectation, but something simple and kind. It could be cooking a meal together once a week, or taking a short evening walk, or even watching a favorite old movie side by side. These little rituals can create moments of overlap where your lives touch again. If you lean more toward acceptance, that too can be healing. Sometimes peace comes from recognizing that you can love someone without sharing everything with them.
In those cases, it can help to nourish your own interests fully and then bring the best of yourself back into the relationship rather than waiting for the relationship to supply what it can't. And here's something important. Whatever choice you lean toward, it's okay if it feels uncertain. These aren't decisions made in an afternoon. They are reflections that unfold over time with patience and tenderness. One day you may feel the desire to reach out. The next you may feel more content in your solitude. That ebb and flow is part of the process. Above all, remember that the story of your relationship doesn't need to be defined only by what you've lost. It can also be defined by how you choose to respond now in this chapter of your life. And often, the smallest acts of awareness and kindness are enough to begin reshaping the landscape of your connection. If this resonates with you, make sure you subscribe. We'll keep exploring these tender but important topics together, step by step, in a way that honors both your heart and your journey. One of the most overlooked truths about long relationships is how much the body shapes the heart. We often think of love and closeness as purely emotional, but so much of what we feel inside our relationships is influenced by what is happening inside our bodies. As we age, hormonal shifts, chronic conditions, and even the side effects of common medications can quietly reshape our moods, our patience, and our desire for closeness. It isn't always about willpower or effort. Sometimes what feels like emotional distance is, in reality, a reflection of physical changes we didn't choose. Take, for example, the role of hormones. In women, the years after menopause can bring not only physical symptoms but also changes in mood and energy. In men, gradual declines in testosterone can affect vitality, drive, and emotional resilience. Add to this the impact of medications for blood pressure, diabetes, or heart conditions, and suddenly it becomes clear why a person who once felt lively and affectionate may now seem withdrawn or irritable. It isn't that love has faded, it's that the body is speaking in ways the heart struggles to translate. Chronic pain is another quiet thief of intimacy. If you've ever lived with arthritis, back pain, or limited mobility, you know how exhausting it can be just to get through the day. That exhaustion leaves little energy for conversation, affection, or patience. It's not that you stop caring, it's that fatigue narrows your capacity. And yet, from the outside, a partner might misinterpret this as emotional coldness. Imagine the misunderstanding that can grow from that misreading. Here's the tender truth. What feels like emotional absence may be the body asking for gentleness. And this realization opens new doors. Instead of assuming my partner doesn't love me anymore, you can begin to ask, is there something physical shaping this change? Is there pain, fatigue, or medication behind this distance? It's a shift from blame to curiosity, and that shift alone can save a relationship. There are small but meaningful steps you can take.
Schedule regular health checkups, not just for major illnesses, but to talk openly with doctors about how medications or conditions may be affecting mood and connection. Consider gentle exercise that restores energy rather than drains it. Walking, stretching, or swimming can bring surprising benefits. Even something as simple as adjusting sleep routines or exploring relaxation practices like deep breathing can ease the tension that creeps into relationships. Most importantly, try to talk about these things without shame. A sentence as simple as, "I've noticed I feel more tired and less patient lately, and I think it might be my health," can soften the ground between you and your partner. It transforms what might feel like rejection into an invitation for understanding. As you reflect on this, I invite you to ask yourself gently, is what I'm experiencing in my marriage truly about love, or could it be about health? This question doesn't demand a quick answer, it simply asks for awareness. Because once you see the connection, you can approach both your relationship and your well-being with new compassion. And that compassion is often the first step toward healing, both inside your body and inside your bond. It's easy to think of separation or divorce as something that happens in a single dramatic moment, but the truth is that relationships are shaped in the quiet rhythm of daily choices. The way you greet each other in the morning, the tone you use when asking for help, whether you sit together after dinner or drift into separate rooms, these little habits build a landscape of closeness or of distance. When you've lived with someone for decades, the smallest gestures carry surprising weight. A gentle touch on the shoulder can mean more than a long conversation, and a harsh word spoken in fatigue can echo louder than an argument. That's why the path toward rediscovering or, if necessary, gently releasing a bond begins not with sweeping changes, but with the smallest steps. One practice that many couples find healing is setting aside 10 minutes each day simply to talk without distractions. No television, no phone, no multitasking. Just two people sharing a moment of presence. 10 minutes may sound small, but think of it as a ritual rather than a task. Over time, those minutes weave a fabric of connection that can catch you when bigger challenges appear. Another simple act is the writing of a kind note once a week. It doesn't need to be poetic. A sentence like, "Thank you for making tea," or "I appreciated your patience yesterday," can soften walls that years of silence have built. Such gestures may seem unnecessary when you've known someone for half a century, but in truth, familiarity can make kindness even more powerful.
It reminds both of you that even after all these years, appreciation is alive. Of course, some conversations are too heavy to carry alone. If words seem stuck or emotions feel raw, inviting a counselor, mediator, or even a trusted friend into the dialogue can create a safer space. Sometimes another presence helps shift the dynamic from confrontation to cooperation. It doesn't mean your relationship is broken, it means you value it enough to seek guidance. And yet, not every couple will choose to rebuild. For some, these steps may reveal that the bond has reached its natural conclusion. That realization, though painful, can also carry dignity if it's approached with honesty and care. In those moments, the same daily rituals, kind words, patient listening, gentle gestures, can help ease the transition, turning parting not into bitterness, but into an act of respect for a life shared. Ask yourself softly, what do my daily choices reveal? Do they nurture closeness, or do they deepen the gap? Am I willing to try one small change, just for a week, to see how it feels? These aren't questions to pressure you, they're invitations to notice the power you still hold in your hands. Because even now, after 50 years or more, your relationship is not fixed in stone. It's shaped each day by the choices you make, choices that can heal or choices that can release, but always choices that matter. There comes a moment, after all the questioning and all the attempts to mend, when peace becomes more important than answers. For some, that peace is found in rediscovering their partner with fresh eyes, learning to love in quieter, gentler ways.
For others, it's found in accepting that their path now leads in a different direction, even if that means stepping away from a marriage that has lasted half a century. Neither choice is failure. In fact, one of the greatest myths we carry is that divorce in later life is a sign of defeat. The truth is far more nuanced. Choosing to part ways after many years can be an act of honesty and courage, just as choosing to stay can be an act of patience and devotion. Both paths require strength, and both can be filled with dignity when walked with respect. I once spoke with Robert, 81, who after 56 years of marriage chose to separate. People kept telling me I was too old to start over, he said, but I realized I wasn't starting over. I was continuing. I still had chapters left to live, and I wanted them to be true to who I am now. His words carried no bitterness toward his wife, only gratitude for the life they had shared, and gentleness toward himself for acknowledging a need he could no longer ignore. And then there was Elena, 78, who after many difficult years decided to stay. She told me, leaving would have been easier in some ways, but I realized that what I truly needed was not a new life, but a new way of living with the life I already had. Both paths require strength, and both can be filled with dignity when walked with respect. I once spoke with Robert, 81, who after 56 years of marriage chose to separate. People kept telling me I was too old to start over, he said, but I realized I wasn't starting over. I was continuing. I still had chapters left to live, and I wanted them to be true to who I am now. His words carried no bitterness toward his wife, only gratitude for the life they had shared, and gentleness toward himself for acknowledging a need he could no longer ignore. And then there was Elena, 78, who after many difficult years decided to stay. She told me, leaving would have been easier in some ways, but I realized that what I truly needed was not a new life, but a new way of living with the life I already had. She and her husband began attending community groups together, not because they had to, but because they wanted to see if they could rediscover laughter in shared experiences. Her choice was not about obligation, but about consciously choosing love in the form it still existed. These stories remind us that there is no single right answer, only the one that brings you the most peace. Wherever you find yourself, the most important step is to release blame toward your partner, toward yourself, and toward the past. What's done is already part of your history. What matters now is the gentleness you bring to the days ahead. Ask yourself, what do I need in order to feel at home in my own heart? Is it companionship, independence, or perhaps simply kindness toward myself? Your answer may not come all at once, and that's okay. Let it emerge slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night. And as you walk forward, don't forget that love remains available to you in many forms. It might come from friendships, from family, from your community, or even from the rediscovery of your own inner light. At any age, love is still possible, and so is joy. If you've been through something like this, what helped you the most? Choosing to stay or choosing to leave? Share your experience in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so we can keep walking this path together with openness, care, and the wisdom that comes only from years well lived.